This time on Naval, I finish the Broadsider. Seriously, all of it. Gonna finish it. Whole thing. I may have lied a little bit in the end of my last video. I told you that the next thing that I needed to do was weather the frame, but I realized that there were some things that I had to do before I weathered the frame because of the paint that I used. So I welded the frame together because the bolts weren't tight enough to keep everything rigid, and then I removed the bolts for color separation, and I welded the handle on, and I welded the brackets for the dampers in the back on because paint that I used would boil off if I welded it after it was weathered, so I had to do that first. But I also said that it would be a redundant process from what I did on the Canon, and it wasn't. I used entirely different techniques, so I filmed that. First, I had to put red rust primer on it. It looks like rust, but it's just primer, and it actually protects from rust. So I put that on first. And you can't just spray it on, you have to blot it, because rust doesn't look like spray paint, it looks like rust. After the frame looked decent from that, I sprayed small areas and wiped it back off, and it gave me some areas that were clean metal, and I thought that looked really cool. And then I moved on to the blue, and I tried to match the spots that were blue on the game pretty exactly. And after looking at pictures, the spots on the frame that were blue were pretty much the same on both sides. I think they just copy and pasted. That was actually pretty difficult because when I'd spray on the areas that I wanted blue, I had to wipe off the overspray from around it very quickly because, you know, it can't look like it's spray paint. It's supposed to look like it's chipped off blue paint. And then I did the same thing that I did on the Canon, which was use acrylic paints in different colors to weather it to make it look realistic. And here's the final product. And now I'm gonna play with wood. The wooden mount rings for the rear part of the Canon need to be cut out and glued together, but I don't want to cut the splits that are going to be in the ring until after they're glued together. So in order to cut them out, I need a hole so that I can put my jigsaw down through the hole. That way I can cut out the center section without having to cut in from the outside, because I don't want to do that split until they're glued together. That way all the splits line up. It'll make sense later. Big hole. When I cut these tight curves around where the shocks get mounted, you're gonna see some smoke. It's tighter than this blade can cut, so I need to kind of wiggle my way around to get through it, but this is the only blade I've got. I borrowed this, so here we go. Yay. And because this is YouTube and it's magical, the other two are already done. The 3 rings are gonna be one piece. The reason I have 3 pieces is because this is how thick it is to scale in the game. And I'm gonna glue them together because that's what you do to turn multiple pieces of wood into one piece of wood. And this one has a different internal diameter because this is the one that touches Canon, and these just go around the outside, and they'll look like they're holding on to the metal on the outside of the Canon, but they actually won't be. I measured very carefully to make sure that ends up working out when it gets to that point. You can let me know in the comments if I'm doing this wrong. I'm not sure if you're supposed to spread the glue first. I feel like that would leave air pockets, and if you just had a big thing in the middle, then it would squish out evenly. Like putting thermal paste on a processor. As long as it squishes out the whole way around, it's just like putting thermal paste on a processor, then I know I have full coverage and there's no air bubbles in it. That's how I'm doing it, because I've put thermal paste on stuff before, but haven't glued together big giant rings of plywood. They need to be glued together first before I drill the holes and do the splits. So much for being thoughtful, doing things like talking about air bubbles and thermal paste, and then I just put the glue in the wrong place entirely. Glue first, drill holes and cut them apart later. It's trying to move around. There it goes. All right, now it's not trying to move it. This is a nightmare, trying to get these to stay aligned. Once the glue starts going down your arm, you know you're not doing something right. Probably should have done this in the first place. Now that clamps in the way from clamping it that way. Is my lack of woodworking knowledge showing? This is ridiculous, man. Okay. Glue's dry. Now I can take the clamps off. Starscapes commented in the last video and said no patron names were harmed too badly in the making of this video. He was wrong. I just didn't mention it. Some of these names took an absolute beating with all the welding that I did on the table. A lot of them got holes, but Cameric is pretty much gone. Printed out a replacement for that. Shameless Patreon plug. If you want your name on the table, it's only $1 a month. You get access to extra content, and I'll send you 3D files from the Canon. And if your name gets super messed up like Cameric's did, I'll replace it. Check out that fresh new name. Woo! $1 a month. Link in the description. I thought the wood glue dried a lot faster than it does, but apparently you have to wait a long time for it. I knew it would take a while to dry because it's like water-based PVA, you know, but I was thinking that it would get sticky enough that I'd be able to work on this pretty quickly afterwards, but I had to wait a long time for this to dry. Now I can drill the holes, which the dampers that I'm going to use are off of my truck, but these happen to be exactly 1.25 inches around the big washers on the top where the mount goes on. I'm second guessing myself. Measure twice, drill once, right? Yeah, exactly 1.25 inches. It is. Okay. Wow, don't do that. Good Lord. The tip just started to poke through. Because of that, I can flip it over and drill from the other side, and then I get nice clean holes. Everybody likes a clean hole. Perfect. I just realized I haven't changed the blade since I did the Dragonglass Game of Thrones weapons. Throw a new blade on this thing. Let's try this again. Now, I can test fit this on the Canon. Like a glove. Well, some of it's not super close, but nobody will notice that. It'll be our secret. It's cut here. Also, clampering pieces. Yay! These are my hinges, and I need to make space for them because they will make the pieces way too far apart otherwise. And then I'll just transfer it, and now I need to cut that little section out. It's exactly where it needs to be. Just right. No, it's hot. Little hinges. I gotta sand all the excess glue off before I put the hinges on because I won't be able to sand that part with the hinge in there. Then I'm gonna use this thing because it doesn't matter if it has a perfect finish on it because in the game, it looks like it's a piece of driftwood. So, here we go. Normally, you wouldn't need to worry about drilling pilot holes for screws that are this small, but there's not a whole lot of meat from where the screws go in to the edge of this. I'm afraid it'll crack it. So I'm gonna give it little pilot holes to make sure I don't break this piece that I've spent so much time on. Well, that's cool. I just drilled the whole way, and that tape marks how deep I need to drill for the screw. And it didn't come out the other side, so that means my screw won't come out the other side. I could put these in with a drill, but I'm not because it's far more likely to strip them out because they are very short and I have way more control like this. It's almost like a Pac-Man. Oh no! Look at that. My screw punched through just a little bit. I guess I didn't pilot drill quite far enough. Maybe that screw went in wonky. There could have been a hard spot in the wood or whatever. I'm gonna chalk it up to that. That way it's not my fault. Perfect. The one difference that I'm intentionally going to do for this is using one of these draw clasps instead of a little piece of metal with a nail through it to hold this thing together, because that's what the one in the game has, and it's ridiculous. Probably be fine on mine, but I think this is gonna look cooler and it will allow me to take it apart without pulling nails out of my block of plywood that I just made. So this is how I'm doing it. Ta-da! The cannon is all set up and it is aligned in the way that it is going to be mounted. That way I can get the lengths for the rope that I need to cut, and this stuff is stiff and it is ridiculously hard to cut, but I need to make a bunch of pieces because the way the ropes go through this block in the front is absolutely impossible. They go in 3 together side by side and they come out of the bottom in a big triangular pattern, which makes no sense and doesn't work in real life. So I'm gonna cheat and have holes drilled down through the top halfway, and the ropes will mount in that. And then I'll have 3 spots on the bottom on each side where there's little 2-inch nubs of rope that stick out, and those will sit on the ground. So now I need to tie off 6 2-inch sections of rope with some yellow string, just like in the game, and then cut them all apart before I can get my ropes for the top. This is Kevlar. Massive overkill for a little piece of decoration, but it'll look cool and it'll be accurate. Because this doesn't serve any purpose and it's decorative, I'm just gonna pull it underneath itself and wedge it tight, and then I'll cut off that little bit there. The guy at the store had these special giant shears for this stuff that were like cable cutters, but they were absolutely huge and I don't have those, so I'm not really sure how I should cut this. I'm gonna tape it where I'm gonna cut it, just like the guy did at the store, to help keep the fibers together. Start with the easiest thing first, see if I can make it through it. These fibers are incredibly tight, so I have a feeling this blade's not gonna be able to go through because it's too thick, but I might be able to work my way through it if I keep readjusting it. Oh, I think I can do it, little by little. Oh, there it goes. And that can get stuffed into the block. I just need to make 5 more. I got these bad boys done. Now I need the major rope lengths cut. The way I'm gonna do it is by measuring them from the front and back of the block, because obviously it goes through the block, so that doesn't work. So go like this, estimate the amount that it's going to penetrate the block, make sure it's pulled tight. Then I just hold my finger where I need to cut it. And because this is a conical section, the back rope is going to be longer than the front rope. So to get the middle rope size, I take the long rope and the short rope that I already cut, I go right between the 2 lengths and cut this for the middle one. These don't have to be too exact because the ropes are gonna get glued to the cannon and the cannon's gonna get glued to the block. And if I ever want to take the cannon out of the whole rig, that block and the ropes will come with it. So these won't actually be holding the cannon because of tension. They'll be holding the cannon with adhesive. The best way I found to cut this, punch down into it with the tip and then rock it and work my way around the rope, turning it a little bit after every cut. Still not quick, but trust me, that is the easiest way to do it. There's no easy way to do this part that I can think of because these ropes come in at an angle. So I'm gonna mark out where the ropes go in on the front and back. I'm gonna draw lines across, then I'll find the center, and then I'll figure out the width. And then I'll have to look at the sides again to get the angle that I need to drill into the block. All of this is because these ropes do not like to bend very much. You can't get a tight radius. So it can't wrap around the cannon and then turn straight to go down into the block because it'll push the cannon off of the block and it'll probably try to crush the plastic, which is not good. I'm gonna do a middle hole first because that way if I screw up, it's easier to hide because it has ropes on both sides of it. I'll have to drill down a little bit before I rock it. Well, that was fun. So I can get it in. It is a little difficult. It's gonna be hard when it's wrapped around the cannon. I think I'll be able to squish it in there. And that hole's deep enough that the electrical tape is hidden. It doesn't like that. Because these ropes are touching, I have to drill the holes right up against each other, and this bit does not like it. If I paid however much a Forstner bit costs, maybe I could do this with the drill bit, but this isn't gonna work. I'm gonna have to get most of the holes drilled so that I know what I'm doing where, and then I'll have to hog it out with my die grinder. Since I've got the block up here getting drilled, I might as well do the holes on the underside also. They only go a 1/2 inch deep, so it shouldn't interfere with the holes on the top. On the money. Right there. The wood in the game doesn't look all new and pretty like this, and I had to drill the holes first because it ripped a bunch of wood off. The wood in the game looks like this. Looks like old driftwood. And the only thing that I could find to make wood look that old was this Malibu gray stain. So I'm gonna cover all the wood with this, and hopefully it makes it look like it's been out in the wasteland for a long time. I've never seen stain like that before. This is weird. This is gray paint. Guessing I need to wipe it off. Maybe I should have read the directions. This is gray paint. Ah, see? There it is. That does not match. That's what I got. I'm gonna have to figure out something to get rid of some of this gray paint. Let's see what this thing says. So if I want less gray paint on my block that's completely covered with gray paint, apparently I need to wipe it off with a mineral spirits cloth. Let's try that. Hey, it's not quite so much like gray paint now. This is working. I'm glad I read the instructions. The more you know. That looks pretty much like what I expected it to. I can't get it out of the end grain, which isn't surprising, but I can just sand that back. All right, these are done, but they don't look the way I thought they would with the gray paint on them, so I'm gonna weather them. And I'll be right back as soon as that is done, which is right about now. Ta-da! In the process of re-weathering this, I decided that the gray paint was not the look that I wanted. I wanted it to look more realistic. So I beat it up with this file and this rasp to make it look like this. And then I stained it and I tried different spray paints. I did a bunch of stuff to this to get it to look the way I want it to. And I finished the ring also. And it's time to put them on. But first, I need to get my alignment just right because this is critical right now that everything is perfectly lined up, because at this point, I'm gonna drill the hole through the block that's going to determine where the cannon sits in alignment with the frame, because the front shocks are going to hold the cannon to the rear. They can't extend further than that, and these hold it forward because they have stops and they can't push out, and then once there's weight on them, they lock into place. So the placement of the block and everything has to be in its place so that when I drill this hole, it doesn't mess it up, because this hole determines everything's location. That has to be perfectly lined up with its spot. This has to have its travel set. And then these shocks, they were slightly off. It was almost perfect, but this didn't quite go on the cannon right where I wanted it to. So I shortened them so that it fits a little bit. And I took a tiny bit of material off of this, I drilled a hole, and I safety wired this in place to make them slightly shorter. So now their extent is only to right there, and they can still move. So that alignment is perfect. That's dead on. There's not much space between where it can sit on this and where it will hit the frame, so that has to be exact. With these holes drilled, they're exactly the same on both sides. So I'm gonna mark one side. With this side marked, I'll measure for the other side. That way I know they start at the exact same location. I got a new toy. Check that out. I feel like Uncle Buck. With the ropes not in, I can see where I'm hitting and make sure that the alignment doesn't go off at this point. Now if I can be accurate from this side and hit the same hole, and I'll have a nice line straight across. And this drill bit's bigger than the threaded rod that I got. That way it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. I can still make it line up and it'll stay in place from clamping force. Look at that. These little nubs are quick and easy to put in, so I'm gonna use 5-minute epoxy. It sets up super fast. Probably had about a dozen ideas on how I'm gonna glue the big ropes in to go around the cannon. And I think I've finally come up with the way that I'm gonna do it, which is to put the ropes in on one side, and to glue the ropes to the wood, I'm gonna use super glue. This might look scary that I have needles, but you can buy these at farm stores. They're for use on animals, and if you clip the tip off, they're safe, and I use them for gluing. I can fill this with super glue, and that way I'll be able to inject the glue down in around the rope and glue them in place while they're set. That way I don't have to worry about the epoxy setting up too quickly or having to wait a full day for wood glue to dry. I know there's other options, but this seems to be the best one. Kicker. Isn't super glue wonderful? Super glue can fog on paint, so if I used it for this part and it ended up making the finish look bad around where the ropes were at, I would have been really angry. So epoxy it is for this section. No, stay where I put you. Perfect. It's been a long time coming. Now I can just inject a bunch of super glue on this side to get those anchored and re-drill the hole. These shocks back here, they don't make any sense, to be honest. They are floating in the game, they're not actually attached, but making these mount brackets for them have to hold the shocks in alignment. You have such a tiny area to create the torque on the shock to hold it up, and it has to support the weight of the entire cannon. If this thing was actually made out of steel, there's absolutely no way that you could put any kind of shock back here because it would break it, or it wouldn't compress because it would be bending the shaft because this weighs so much. Shocks are meant to take force this way, not that way, but in this case, because I have a plastic cannon, it'll work. Look at that. Would you just look at it? Oh man, that's satisfying. This is so good. Oh yeah. This is too close to the frame. This is what I was talking about with everything interacting. Everything has to be lined up with each other because this is just a hair too far. My bolt doesn't line up in the rear. I moved it too much. The Broadsider. It's heavy. You might notice that there's something missing from right here, and that's the ignition system. Time to install this. Cheaper than a grill lighter, more effective. I'm gonna pull the guts out of the case of this and mount it right here, just like it is in the game. And then I'll extend the wires out. I need to connect them so that I have the safety switch and the on-off button up here, and I'll hook it up to a new on-off button that looks like the one in the game with a big red button that I forgot to buy. I left my lights on. This button. Hoping that this thing is pretty simple inside so that it's easy to mount the guts of it. I don't just want a black taser box sitting on the side, even though that's kind of what it looks like in the game. Just has a little box sitting right there. I want it to look cooler than that. And I want the wires exposed. It looks neater that way. The only thing that's a pain, if I take this apart and put it on, is its charging port is right there. You plug it into the wall to charge it. And now that I'm taking it apart, that part just falls apart, which is what I was afraid of. It's just double-sided tape on everything. Switch, arming indicator, momentary button, whatever this thing is. And then these, there we go. There. Now these wires that I just clipped off of this switch will get extended to go to this switch on the handle. These will get extended to go to leads that go into the firing chamber. And then I don't know what to do about the charging part. I'll leave that on there and figure it out later. And if double-sided tape was enough for them to stick all of it inside of it, I might as well just do the same thing to put it on this. This switch has a halfway point that turns on a flashlight, and I don't need a flashlight. So we're just gonna eliminate that. But I'm gonna keep this LED, but this LED became disconnected from the switch when I took it apart, which it tells you if it's armed or not. So that's gonna stay, but I don't have a soldering iron right now, so I can't put that back together because that lead is so tiny. So this will get mounted here, and the LED light will get mounted right there. That way I have an indication if it's ready to fire or not. But this wire here need to be extended all the way back around to here on this button. This is a momentary on button. So when you push it down, it makes the connection. When you release it, it doesn't, and it matches what it looks like in the game, except it's not red. So I'll have to do something about that in the future, but for right now, it's gonna work just fine. For all the keyboard warriors out there, I'll take this apart and solder it later. Right now, I'm just gonna twist everything together because I gotta get this thing done. The problem is if I route this wire over that, then this is no longer removable. So I'm just going to kick it out the frame, backside, so that it's hidden, at least when you're looking at it from this side. I have enough space, I can shove it through here. It comes up and it actually, in the game, it sticks out of the handle. So it'll go up into the handle through right there. So I have to drill a hole for that. I don't know why one of the wires runs through the flintlock, but in the pictures of the one in the game, it does. So I'm copying it. This wire is only 1/10 of a millimeter different than the hole because it needs to be very close to the same size. That way it's easy to seal the hole up, because when the explosion happens inside the cannon, I don't want it to come out. So it's gotta be tight. This floppy wire is multi-strand and it's easily flexed, whereas this is solid core and it's not easily flexed. It'll connect to this inside for my electrodes where the spark is formed. To get the floppy wires to stay where I want them, I used this trick for a couple of other projects. I can't remember if I learned it somewhere or if I came up with it, but it works really well. You put your hot glue on something and then you stick it like that. That way you don't have to get in there and try to hot glue on a wire. That's difficult, but the way I just did it is easy and effective. So the gap was about the same as it was on the taser, but because it had to travel through so much wire, it needs higher voltage. So that's why I was going tick, tick, tick. But with the gap closer now, it doesn't need as much voltage, and it doesn't take as long for it to build up that voltage in that fancy little electronic magic thing. So it does that now. Yeah. Oh no! This is why these projects take absolutely forever. You know what that means. Off camera, I found my soldering iron and I finished up all the connections on the taser parts and set it up so that the LED is on when the thing is armed. And I wrapped the rear handle with tennis racket grip tape so that it looks like it does in the game. And there's one more small modification that I want to do before I use this thing. It's extremely heavy. And this is not where you're supposed to pick it up in the game. You're supposed to pick it up from this bar. And these bars are 1.5 inches and they're not sharp, but they're sharp enough that it hurts when you pick it up. So I need to put some kind of grip on where I'm gonna pick it up if you pick it up like this, you have to leverage it. And this is seriously like 100 pounds. So I think I might put a grip on here. That way I can pick it up and shoot it. But I need to figure something out because the thing weighs too much. But it is done, and it does look cool. The cannon's done. I'm super excited to shoot it, but the only ammo that I have is this one, and I need to show you how to make it. It's hard to paint fuzz, but you can get rid of a lot of it with a torch. That melts down most of the fuzz, but then I need to get it smoothed out, which is where the next paint comes in. This Rust-Oleum leak seal stuff, it has the ability to fill gaps and holes up to 1/8 of an inch. It's like the peelable rubber paint, but it has something in it that makes it bridge gaps, which makes it make this reasonably smooth so that it doesn't look that much like a tennis ball anymore. But you can't paint it while you're holding it, so I came up with a trick for that too. I just take a pick and now I can hold it with a wire. Ready to paint. Once that's dry, hit it with flat black, and you've got a cannonball. Still squeaks. Got my ammo, now I need my fuel. Luckily, there's lots of options. Butane has butane in it. Carb cleaner has toluene, acetone, heptane, and methanol. Starting fluid has diethyl ether, heptane, propane, and butane. Apparently, Canadian superglue kicker doesn't say on the can what's actually in it, but this stuff is flammable. And good old propane. People also use hairspray, but hairspray is basically the same propellants and volatile compounds that explode like are in the other ones that we already talked about. It just leaves everything sticky, so there's no point in using that. Might as well use these that are basically solid fuel, no sticky stuff. But there is one more fuel that I could use. This tank here that is bolted to the wall is filled with acetylene. Acetylene is incredibly dangerous. The different chemicals in these will mostly explode at around 120 psi if they are mixed stoichiometrically with atmosphere and they're at atmospheric pressure. If you compress these and they're stoichiometrically mixed, you can get way more pressure out of the explosion, but pretty much 120. Acetylene gives you pressures much higher than that. And you have the ability to mix oxygen with the acetylene, and you can make it even more powerful. I'm not sure if I want to use that. It would be very dangerous, but I could probably really shoot a tennis ball if I used that stuff. I feel like it was a lot of fun when I fired my Doom rocket launcher inside the garage, and it's late at night, but I need to fire this thing because I just finished it. So I'm gonna stick some rags in here and set it off. I'm gonna put some propane in it. Let's see if it works. I didn't even see the rags leave it. That shook me through my chest. The rags are gone, so they left. I couldn't see them, but they're not in there anymore. I feel like you, after just seeing that, don't need to be told to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can see the test where I actually shoot the cannonballs with it. The tennis ball cannonballs. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you next Sunday when I take this thing out to play with it.